Searching for answers.
Here are today's top stories.
It's been over 24 hours.
And the local news.
What we see are a lot of things that are going on the earth.
This is Art of Heaven News Talk.
Broadcasting live from WHPC studios in Garden City, New York, this is Art of Heaven News Talk, where we deliver global, national, and local news through the lens of faith. I am your host, Mark Russak of the Russak Outlook podcast and YouTube channel. Today, people who've joining me are our co-host, media personality Chrystina Orlando, and former storm chaser, Dan Bartucci. If you want to join the conversation, please, by all means, join us on 516-572-7440. How is everybody doing?
Woo!
How are you? I'm good. I'm jacked up, subbing in for the great Johnny Brummett. Hopefully he'll be back here next week. He's out taking care of some family affairs in the great state of Tennessee. But I wanted to jump right into it because rumor has it that there has been a couple of things happening in the news.
Just a few things.
All right, so let me just kind of touch it on a few things, set up where we want to go. So the world today, it's spinning faster than any time in human history. Here's some things that we've just seen over the past 6 weeks. The outcome of the U.S. presidential debate creates the pivot point for the Democrats to remove Joe Biden. The attempted assassination of Donald Trump. If successful, this would have triggered a potential tsunami of unforeseen world events that would have impacted not only the United States, but the entire world. Kamala Harris is now appointed as the Democratic presidential de facto candidate, really inserted by the global machine, which is really pulling the strings. So much for saving democracy. House Republicans are now pushing to remove the president before his term ends through the 25th Amendment. Many are now finally asking the obvious question: who is really running the United States government? Israel and the Jewish people continue to be targeted and isolated by anti-Semitism foundations of evil from around the globe. New left-leaning governments transition to power in France and England. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and national partners are fueling world chaos and instability in the continents all around the world: Europe, Asia, Middle East, North, South America, etc. And then there's a new report that just came out that 10 million plus migrants have entered the U.S. border in the past 3.5 years under the current administration. But since we look through the lens of faith, while some may say all appears grim, the good news is the good news of Jesus Christ. Jesus said in Romans 12:12, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer." John 16:33, Jesus says, "I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." So what say you, Dan Bartucci?
Did you miss anything?
That was just a few things.
Woo! I'm sweating.
Yeah. I saw a bunch of things this week, and maybe you want to take your notes, Mark. They'll be valuable for somebody in 10 years on their AP Global History or their AP U.S. History exam. I cannot believe that's real life.
Yeah.
And we've been here in the studio in the last couple of weeks, and every time we do a show, the assassination or debate, I was like, I can't believe what we're coming back to. And now we came back to another crazy week. In fact, I think this week alone, now the FBI is digging into the assassination attempt on former President Trump, and they're trying to say, well, maybe he wasn't shot, and we still need to get to the bottom of this, right? We saw the hearing with the director. I'm sorry, I forget her name, but, they grill her all day.
Yep.
She says, no, I'm staying in. We're okay. We did the right thing. And the next morning, I'm resigning.
Yeah.
We, whatever side you're on, whether you're pro-Biden, whether you're pro-Trump, whatever you're going to fall, we still need to know what happened. And you could look at now endless hours of footage where this shooter, this young gunman, they see him on the roof, they see him with a rangefinder, they see him flying a drone, they see all this, and he still gets 8 or 9 shots off at a former president of the United States. It's wild to think that that's one of the stories we're living through.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I knew going into this election year, it was going to get crazy because the last election year, what happened? We had COVID. We had all these crazy things. We had riots in the streets, buildings on fire. I didn't know that it was going to be quite like this. I think that each day that goes by, I think I have an idea of what's going on. I think I have an idea of the truth of what's happening. But each day, it changes. It's very crazy making.
And it really, to me, it just signifies the lust for power and how far people will go. If you look at the role of the United States government, and there's so many people that want to as a matter of fact, the UN Charter 2030 says they want to remove the United States as the world superpower.
Right.
So,
right.
Take it right there. You're talking about the assassination attempt. To your point, we're 2 weeks later and we still don't know what happened. Is this going to become another John Kennedy fiasco?
I mean, we're still looking at John Kennedy, right? We're still looking at those tapes. We're still wondering how on national television they walk up and shoot Jack Ruby. Oswald was shot by Jack Ruby. Right. Yeah, I had that the other way around.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, so I think we have to step back, and if we put the lens of faith on that we want to do here at Art of Heaven, right? God is still on the throne.
Absolutely.
And some days we have to go to bed, and some days we have to wake up and put our feet on the ground when we get out of bed in the morning and say, God, thank you that you were on the throne today, because this is nuts.
It's nuts.
And we need to know that you are in control of all this, because it doesn't seem like anybody else, certainly in the United States, is in any kind of control in the last 6 weeks.
Well, it's an interesting point, because many people will say, including the ex-president himself, that it's only by an act of God that he's alive.
I believe that. I'm trying to get to conspiracy here, although it is kind of fun to talk about. But I wonder, what are the things that we don't know? Because these are the things that they're willing to share in the media and things like that. But there has to be more things that we have no idea about. And I fear that, because the things that we do know about are pretty bad.
Exactly. So, the other thing that I'm curious about too, and we heard this from a lot of people who engage with the Secret Service and who have had Secret Service detail, and they say the very first thing they look at is whoever they're protecting, where's the line of sight?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the direct line of sight was to that rooftop where that gentleman was, and how is that not protected? And then you have civilians in the field pointing, raising, screaming, he's got a gun, and nothing's done.
Yeah. You have the local police officer that was on a ladder to the roof.
Yep.
Got line of sight on him, had nothing with him but his own hands. The shooter pointed a rifle at him, and rightfully so, right? He falls down or jumps down the ladder. So it wasn't, I think I love talking about the JFK statue. Like, no one had eyes on Lee Harvey Oswald, right? No one's looking at the book depository. But when you are in that field and you see these aerial images, there's these buildings right in line of sight. And now all this evidence that points to they knew who he was, right? They have video now where they have the recording of when the guys get on the roof to see the assassin that is dead. They're like, oh, yeah, this was the guy. So they knew somebody was in there. I just don't understand how this happens. I think we're right to do a lot of questioning. I hope for the sake of unity in this country, it's not what we think it is.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly hope that, but I have my suspicions, and I would just, close this thought with, as Christians and really, all people, to, pray for the safety of the leaders that they're protecting, Democrat, Independent, Republicans, it doesn't matter, and pray for, not only their safety, but the safety who's protecting them, because as we saw, these Secret Service agents that were on the stage, they put their lives on the line when they put their body in.
Yes.
That's something very serious. So, sticking with politics for a second, let me transition to the coronation of the new presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, for the Democrats. And many, Chrystina, I'm just kind of curious, your perspective, being the lone woman in this group today. What do you think in terms of so many people willing to vote for or saying that you should vote for Kamala Harris based upon her being a woman or her being a minority?
I have a lot of opinions on this. So I think old school feminism would inform me to say that women are capable, we're deserving of respect, and we have value. It doesn't necessarily mean that just because we're a woman, it gives us an upper hand. So I look at this and I say, who's the best candidate? I don't care if they're a woman. I don't care if they're a man. They're black. They're white. I don't care who's the best candidate. I would not want, me personally, like, well, I used to do comedy in New York City, and I would never ever wanted to be the female comedian, just like for representation purposes. If I'm good, if I'm qualified, if I'm going to be on the ticket because it's going to be a great show, put me on. But I do not want my merit based on being a woman. And so I don't think we should look into voting with that as our lens.
So this is interesting. Now, again, I don't want to have a take on this because I am not the woman in the room. But
I'll allow it.
Do you feel early on here in this first week like there's that push that women, we need to rally and vote for another woman?
I do. And, you know, for me personally, this is just Christina's opinion, okay? I don't know if I necessarily want a woman as our president. I'm going I that.
Say more. That because I didn't expect to hear that
I didn't
today.
expect to hear that either.
Yeah, well, I honestly, I do feel that yes, women and men, we are created equally in the sense of our value, of our worth, of our merit, but we also have different strengths and weaknesses, and God created us that way. This is my interpretation of the Bible. Men have certain strengths, women have certain strengths. I don't necessarily know if being the president is necessarily a task for a woman.
That's interesting.
And that's how I feel.
Well, you know, they do say there's a rumor that the woman in a marriage anyway, that is the woman who turns the man's head, that she has control of the neck. So
she's the neck.
Yeah, she has that way of persuading the leadership of the home. But I would say, you know, I feel like you in the sense that I don't really care, male, female, black, white, Indian, Asian, it doesn't matter. If they're qualified and they can do the best job, that's who they want. I would say two of the female leaders that I think of in the past 50 to 75 years that I thought were tremendous were Margaret Thatcher of England and Golda Meir of Israel. She had so much pressure with the 1967 Six-Day War, the 73 War of Yom Kippur, and I thought they did outstanding roles. So they basically, I just can't say enough about their leadership capabilities.
Yeah. See, I don't see so much of the male-female aspect, although I recognize it's certainly part of the argument. I think where she's making inroads is going to be in that younger demographic of voters, right? Because she's going to get into the social streams more than a 70 or 80-year-old white male in the United States is going to get into. So I think it's certainly, again, the world has been upended again by this change. I'm still unsure how the democratic process works. Like, we have to go to a convention. Like, can we just name any candidate? Like, I think we're going to get also another U.S. government history and how these conventions work. Most people never pay attention to the conventions and how.
That's true.
And now we're going to learn about how this process works.
It'll be interesting coming in, and they're landing in Chicago, which if anybody's as old as I am, you know about the 60s and what happened in Chicago back then. But listen, you're listening to Art of Heaven News Talk on 90.3 WHPC. I'm Mark Russak here with Chrystina Orlando and Dan Bartucci. Phone lines are open at 516-572-7440. And our next topic is Israel. I wanted to talk a little bit about Benjamin Netanyahu arriving in the United States this week at clearly a very tumultuous turning point in American history where, as he's coming in, the American president...
No one's there.
Right.
Yep.
And no one is there to greet him. You know, you talk about the ultimate snub. I personally was appalled at that. I mean, I just, you know, whether it would have been Biden or Netanyahu, or Kamala Harris.
Just someone.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, and that really, if you go back to Barack Obama and how he treated Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration, let's face it, these people are no big fans of Israel. And I will say, as Christians, you know, I'll speak for myself. I fully support the Jewish people. I understand the plight of many who are concerned about what they see in the war over there. But let's face it, you know, what happened on October 7th was instigated by the Arabs and the Palestinians over there to the most heinous act of evil that I think I've witnessed or been around to see.
Right. Mark, why does it feel like it's accelerating? Right, this is a battleground as old as the Bible itself, going back to the earliest days of the founding of the fathers, right? But why does it feel like accelerating? You mentioned Obama, and you mentioned this current administration's task towards Israel, and here we are, where it's not even peaceful protests,
Right.
and the protests that were in D.C. this week, they're pulling down and burning the American flag now. Like, that's where the anti-Israel
Crazy.
protest has gone. The protest that was I think it was near the National Mall, they're ripping down the American flags in view of the National Mall, the Vietnam Memorial, all this in America, burning the flag now to be anti-Israel. So why, you're the
Not
resident
only-
expert here in the studio, on this, why does it feel like it's accelerating?
I would say not only that, they replaced the American flag and erased the flag of Hamas, and this is what they're supporting. And Netanyahu in his speech to Congress kind of alluded to that. So many of them don't even understand the geography of it. When they say the river to the sea, they don't know the history of what's going on. I would say also that it's an opportunity for us to reach out and educate people. Certainly, we want the best for the Arabs. We want the best for the Palestinians. We want the best conditions for them. But it's got to be a two-way street. There's got to be responsibility there, on both sides. To your point, I think the masks are off, meaning we're really seeing how, because this is not just an American issue. This is throughout Europe. This is, when you hate a people just because they're Jewish and nothing else, that's rooted in evil. And I can't say anything, any way around it. So I think as Christians, it's our responsibility to reach out and support not only the Israelis, but also love the Arabs, love the Palestinians, support them in terms of how can we engage with them to build up their community.
There's peace, right? As a believer, we want to be on the side of peace and unity and knit together in one body. But again, with the flag, what other protests have you seen another nation's flag raised in place of the United States flag?
Yeah, I think what's really sad is that we have a lack of reverence for the country that we live in. It's a crime to burn the American flag. It is here. We should be united, and I just don't understand why now we don't have any respect for our own country.
Well, and that's really people who are moving the process and trying to tear this country down. We have to come to the fact and to understand there are people in this country that have intentions of taking this government down, of taking this country down.
We're seeing that so evidently this month.
Yeah, and what we talked about in the past 6 weeks. Where is the regard for America? Where is the ability to stand on moral high ground, as opposed to who's going to vote for me? That's who I'm going to go with.
You know what, Mark just said that, and it just reminded me of when we have this spirit of selfishness, it's what's in it for me. I want my voice heard. I want this for me. But we're not thinking about what about my neighbor? What about the collective? What about the whole? And thinking about one another. I feel like that is so absent right now.
And it's out there. I think we saw it in a two-faced way when Biden stepped down earlier this week, right? You had all these people that were so negative against President Biden, right? And he had to come out. He's killing the country and destroying it. And then the moment he steps down, they have these tearful, Joe Biden is a great human being.
Oh, yeah.
Well, where was that?
Right.
You can't play both sides,
Oh,
right? You
yeah.
have to be on the side of where we want to be with peace and unity.
And that's why, to me, listening to a lot of the news feeds, Hollywood's responses, it's worse than the typical stereotype of a bad car salesman.
Oh, the facade,
I
yeah.
mean, it's like you watch the news and you want to take a shower.
Yes.
It's
A brain shower.
Yeah, I mean, it's an assault on people's intellects.
It's funny, in the morning at the gym that I go to, they have a span of 10 or 12 TVs above the treadmills.
And showers, I hope.
Yes, but hold that thought.
After you watch the news.
In the span of me being on the treadmill for 45 minutes or an hour, I'm not bragging, that's very, very slow. You don't want to know. But so many people come in, right? There's a gentleman that comes in and he turns 3 TVs to CNN. The next person in comes the next 3 TVs to
A rage
Newsmax.
workout.
That's where we're headed. Like, we are really in a wild spot. I don't want to add any more to the set of lines that you had when we started the show, but I'm sure next week we're going to add something else crazy into this.
Absolutely. I just wanted to just stay with Israel for a second because I think this is important for our audience to recognize. We're watching everything that's happening in Gaza, but there's northern Israel. There are 70 to 80,000 people who have been evacuated from their homes for the last 6 months. And because of what's happening by Hezbollah in Lebanon and invading there, and that, what you saw in Gaza is going to be a walk in the woods compared to what will ultimately come. And we have to remember who is behind this. It's the Iranian Ayatollah and their government, not the people of Iran. The Persian people, the Iranian people, they're beautiful.
We love them.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're instigating a war, and, fortunately for us, the Bible foretells of these things. We see of what's going to happen in this area of the world. We can look at Jeremiah, we can look at Isaiah and the ultimate destruction of Damascus and the burning or in Jeremiah where he talks about the bow of Elam, and Elam happens to be right where the nuclear facility is in Iran today. Is that a foretelling? So, all of these things are there, but that's what we need to keep our eye on, because the enemies of Israel are lining up on the northern border in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and unfortunately for us, the current administration is supporting financially a lot of the funding that they're able to facilitate for the missiles, the arsenal. There's 150,000 missiles pointed at Israel right now by Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Whew.
So it's a sobering thought, I know. But
Well, the roads ended at Jerusalem, right?
Right,
The
that's
Bible
right.
is not a choose-your-own-adventure Hardy book, right? It goes in a specific way, and everything's going to head back there. It feels like
Yes.
we're heading back there faster than we thought.
Yeah, and Mark, you said a few things about how we are funding certain situations. Can you speak more about that?
Sure. Well, if you take what the Trump administration was doing, they put sanctions on the Iranians, so they were practically broke. And then we removed all these sanctions with the current administration. They were able to then go out and sell their oil and basically, build up their government and fill their proxies, meaning they were funding Hamas, they were funding Hezbollah, they were funding the Houthis, and they get that money and funding from their economy from their oil fields. And because this administration has let those oil fields go free, in the markets, and then I will say they're also selling to China, to Russia. There's other things that are happening there, but that supplies the economy behind it. I did want to cover a few other things. We're going to go to our drive-by headlines.
Wait a minute.
Drive-by headlines.
You just mentioned Russia and China, and again, not to play the alarmist here, but a lot's happening in the world. So it was just roughly within about an hour before President Biden addressed the nation, talking about him turning down the nomination. Russian and Chinese military aircraft were spotted together about 200 miles off the coast of the United States in kind of a joint exercise. I think about Sarah Palin when she ran, right? She could see Russia from her backyard. Well, if she looked out her backyard before that address by President Biden, they're testing the waters, right? China sent a spy satellite across the United States last summer. They see the weakness that's happening in this country.
Yep.
And before we know it, those two countries we do not want playing war games together, I would assume,
No.
Mark. That's not two that we want to have on our bingo card.
So what about what's going on in the Olympics, Dan?
Yeah, Olympics start tonight. You might be excited. I hear Celine Dion and Lady Gaga are on the ticket.
Oh.
Yeah, pick your poison there. I'm sure it'll be a little bit of a drama in both. But Protesters in France already made a disruption in the Olympics. France has a wonderful, amazing high-speed rail network. And arsonists were on the track early this morning. They've disrupted travel nationally. So there is problems outside the borders, right? But we have climate activists and all kind of activists in France today. So it's going to be interesting to see how those ceremonies go. They're not in a stadium. They're floating barges down the river.
For the opening ceremony.
I'm excited to
Now,
see it.
back to our other thing. I bet they looked at line of sight for all the barges, though.
Oh, you better
right, for
believe
the
it.
Olympics compared to a
Absolutely.
rally in Pennsylvania.
I hope
Maybe I
so.
shouldn't say that on the air, but okay.
Listen, with all this news, I need some good news.
We
Chrystina,
do.
do you have any good news?
Is there any good in the world?
We are seeing some good in the world.
All right, everyone. We've had a heavy show. There's a lot that we talked about. So I always do our collective inhale in through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay, well, look around. We live on Long Island. It's the summer. This is the peak time to be here. And if you love beachside entertainment, last night there was a beautiful event, and it was hosted by an organization called True Creative House, and it was called Worship on the Water. And on Field 4 in the bandshell area, there was an event full of worship. So there were exhibits, there were networkings, there was local artists, worship performances, showcases, and then there was this entire area where just people were praying over each other and for the country, for one another. So we do have these beautiful spaces. If you just turn off the news and it gets overwhelming, just go in your backyard and you can find goodness everywhere around you.
So this was last night that you had the worship, right?
Yeah, this was last night.
With the ocean as the backdrop?
Oh, it was gorgeous. It was a perfect night, and my goodness, just people from all over the island, and I believe also people from New York City were there as well.
And how many churches were involved?
I believe it was 4
Okay.
that performed with the worship, yeah.
And you said something important, though. Being in community, being in prayer together, we need it. Like,
We
there
need
are
it.
better signs to show of unity versus protest. Okay. There's a time and place for peaceful protest. Mm-hmm. There's a time and place for
Absolutely.
prayer, and
Yep.
we need that more than ever. We need God first and foremost. We need to have more of those come to Jesus meetings that President Biden talked about that
That's
we were
right.
going to have.
That's
So there
right.
is good in the world. Let's get out. Let's worship. Let's worship in the streets.
That's
Let's
it.
worship at the beach.
That's it.
And let's get a little good food going, too.
We need it. We need it.
I mean, if you're going to do that, I mean, my head automatically goes to grilled hot dogs and hamburgers.
I don't think you can tailgate anymore at Jones Beach, though. I think they
Really?
stopped. Yeah, well, I think once they brought those concession stands in.
This is a good news segment.
Sorry.
Well, there was some good news that they did share at the event. It used to be illegal to hand out tracts and to spread the gospel on the beach, but laws have changed, and now
Is that right?
you're allowed to do so, yeah.
I did not know that.
Can you just maybe, for the folks at home, explain what a track is?
Sure. Well, Dan, can you
Well,
elaborate?
yeah, I mean, essentially, a brief brochure, pamphlet, depending how large, talking just specifically to the good news of the gospel, right, and what it
Yep.
means, and an invitation, right? There's evangelism out there. There's street evangelism out there. I know where we live in our town, Mark, we don't live far from each other. There's some folks out in the railroad all the time evangelizing. Get out there. That's what we're called to do. We're called to be witnesses. Let's go do that in a good way and share the good news as being a witness.
Yeah, and I would say, too, who will turn you down if you walk up to someone and say, "Can I pray for you?"
That's true.
And it could be something as simple as that. And if you feel like you're led by the Holy Spirit, let the Holy Spirit work through you, because we are really the feet of Jesus here on earth. So on that note, I'd just like to thank the audience. Hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. We love bringing the good news of the gospel to you, looking at world events through the lens of faith. Thank you. God bless you. Have a great week. See you soon.
Mark, nice work.
Woo!
Miracles happen.
Johnny, we'll see you next week. Come help us.
Miss you, Johnny.
The views expressed on air are not necessarily those of WHPC, its management, or Nassau Community College.